Jai
Jai
Gurudev,
Gurudev Swamiji.
everyone. Jai Gurudev. So, welcome everyone. And most of you know right now I am on my Africa tour. So, already I have finished my Mauritius. Then now I am here in South Africa and we are having lots of fun, different courses we are conducting here. And today we are having with us a very special guest, okay? A very dear art of living teacher, very senior art of living teacher. His name is Shirish Soni. And maybe I will just read out quickly his profile. A wonderful person, uh, diplomat, okay? Ambassador Shirish Soni, an art of living teacher, volunteer, great devotee to Shri Ravi Shankar ji. He was a South African ambassador for many countries: Italy, San Marino, Albania, Malta, Qatar, Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan. Then he has represented South Africa as a permanent representative for three United Nations agencies like Food and Agriculture Organization, World Food Program, International Fund for Agriculture Development. He was a diplomat. Now he is retired. And before joining this government service, he was an entrepreneur. He was having his own textile business, and he won few awards as a Junior Chamber International, 10 Outstanding Young Person of the World of Business, and many more things. Plus, he was from very young age very socially and politically active. And in those days, Indians, we know how we had our freedom fight. In South Africa also, Nelson Mandela and all these, Shirish Bhai, they also fought a freedom fight for South Africa. So, Shirish Bhai, welcome here, welcome on my channel. And I know you are a very great storyteller also. I have listened lots of stories from you, and definitely here we would like to hear something from you. So maybe now I am asking you how it was in those days, because I know in those days it was very difficult in South Africa. So maybe you can put some light on it.
Jai Gurudev Swamiji. And again, welcome to Africa, to South Africa, to Durban, where we are now. In particular, welcome, Swamiji. So the regime developed a system to govern people, which was called apartheid. It was based on racial segregation. So we had four main groups of people in South Africa. The original South African, which they call South African black. Then there was the South African Indian, and then there was the South African colored slash Malay. So people who were part of with the lineage towards Java, Indonesia, Philippines, and so forth, who were brought in the early days of colonialism, were all grouped as colored. And then there was the white. Now, of course, the design was that all privileges were for the white race, very little privileges for the colored race, little less for the Indian, and almost nothing for the African. So it was a new form of slavery. It was a new form of social architecture to allow the capitalist forces to continue in the mines and so forth, getting cheap labor and extracting the wealth of our country. But to give you an explanation, and particularly for your listeners, we were so divided that even the beaches, you take the public beach, the ocean, would be demarcated where African people can go to swim, where colored people will go to swim, where Indian people could go, and where white people could go. The same with our schools, the same with our social life. If we had to go anywhere to a restaurant or so, housing, education. So I had to go to a typical Indian school and so forth. So everything, it was an architecture designed to keep the human race separate. And what we do in Art of Living, we are trying to build a one world family. It was a complete opposite. Complete opposite. It was designed to keep us apart. Now, furthermore, to make the system work, the government was very harsh. People were brutalized, people were tortured, people were lost life, loved ones, limbs, and so forth, because the government wanted it in this way. So it was a very, very difficult period. Of course, there was slavery, then colonialism, and the colonialists came to South Africa. And when they left, they handed over to a white regime which implemented apartheid. And the laws on segregation were very, very difficult. Education, standards of education, work retention. So a black man could not hold a utensil, could not hold a leveler in a building industry or any of the instruments. He was only meant to push the wheelbarrow. A colored or Indian could hold an instrument, but the white could be a supervisor. Other races couldn't be supervisors, leaders, managers. So the economic architecture was also designed to disadvantage people by race. It was a very, very tough time.
Yeah, Shirishji, you were mentioning that after when Mandela started this freedom fight, so at that time you joined him and you were recruited as an underground of African National Congress, right? And the party of Nelson Mandela and participated in operations of its armed wing, right? So it was a great fight for all of you. So maybe I remember you were narrating some very interesting stories about in those what you have done in those days. So maybe definitely you can narrate here also.
Sure, sure. So, it was inevitable for any non-white person to accept the situation that we were under during apartheid. So it came to us naturally as human beings that we belong to each other and that something is so wrong. So everybody who was being prejudiced this badly wanted to, in some way or in some form, oppose the regime. Now, there were two fronts. On the one hand, every means for peaceful transformation and to get the white regime to understand the plight of non-white people was pursued. And every endeavor was made to try to bring about a peaceful transition, which would lead to a non-racial, non-sexist, and democratic South Africa. But the white regime wouldn't relent. Swamiji, they went so far that even in their Bible, they changed wordings to make it seem that those of us who were non-white were not human. So it was fine to have these different classes. So it was a architecture from their churches, from the government and civil society. Now, as young people, as a young man, I was very lucky in that I was able to work in the campaigns of the Natal Indian Congress, which worked very closely with the Transvaal Indian Congress. And as your listeners would know, both these organizations were formed during the period of Mahatma Gandhi, before he had come to India. Now, all endeavors to promote satyagraha, to find a resolution uh, while discussing an equitable solution failed. So the government also increased its intensity of repression on our people. So there was much more intensity in the repression from the regime. And at some point, Mandela and them decided that in their wisdom that we will now have to embark on an armed struggle. So Mandela was made the first commander of the armed wing that had to be formed. And it was named Umkhonto Wesizwe, the spear of the nation. And in the early 60s, the state almost crushed all of the plans of Mandela and his colleagues. They were tried and put to jail. In fact, we were lucky they were not given the death sentence. In a way, it's very sad, but it was quite a celebration when they were given life imprisonment on Robben Island, which you have seen, Swamiji. And from the 60s, the organization's leadership was depleted. So come 1976, the white regime wanted African students to learn their languages, to learn Afrikaans, and they wanted the subjects that they were to learn in school to be taught to them in Afrikaans. So they should learn mathematics, English, science, and so forth in a language that is totally foreign to them. So it became a problem, and the students decided to go out on strike. It is referred to as the Soweto June 16th uprising. And parents then joined, other organizations joined, and from Soweto, which is in Gauteng, it spread across South Africa. I was in college then. I was doing a diploma in cost accounting, Swamiji. And I just emerged as one of the student leaders on the campus that I was on, and I got drawn into the work that the revolutionary forces were busy embarking on. It became very difficult. I then had to leave college and I went to work. But my heart was always in pursuing the fight for freedom. So later on, there were more campaigns of the Natal Indian Congress and the Transvaal Indian Congress. At some point, we formed what was called the United Democratic Front. So all organizations, progressive organizations, which wanted to oppose apartheid came together in a place called Mitchell's Plain in the Western Cape, and they launched this organization. So we were all party to that. Those were all above the ground campaigns. Although the ANC was banned, to be involved in ANC activity would lead to a person going to jail. There was a fine line that one could manage between above ground and underground activity. And then in its stupidity, the government decided to form 3 chambers of government, one for the Indians, one for the coloreds, and one for the whites. And they left the African out again. So there was much debate in the progressive forces, but the view was we should not participate. And that was the anti-tricameral election, parliamentary election campaign, which the progressive forces dealt a serious blow and embarrassed the apartheid regime in that their continuous tweaking of the system wouldn't work. But all of these campaigns were bringing youth from 1976 closer to the progressive forces. And a lot of recruitment was quietly happening by the progressive forces to recruit people into the African National Congress. So I was recruited into a unit called the MJK unit. And I was given tasks to do as an NC member, as an underground operative member. Um and I still continued this fine line of operating above ground and also underground. But as time proceeded, you needed to re-profile yourself and do less work above ground and more work underground. So at some point, I was asked, our unit was asked to bring in a leader of the African National Congress. His name was Ibrahim Ismail Ibrahim. Now, Ibrahim had spent 15 years on Robben Island. He was incarcerated for the work in the early 60s. He had served the full 15-year prison sentence, come out, worked in the underground in Durban in particular for some time, and had gone into exile. But the ANC's decision around this period in '84 was to intensify the struggle inside the country. So we were tasked to bring Ibrahim Ismail Ibrahim into the country and to host him. It's a diplomatic term now, to host him, but in those days we were hiding him in the underground to allow him to do his work. And his job was to meet various units of the ANC to assess our strength in terms of how we should take our strategies going forward. During this period, Mandela and our senior leaders were still in jail. So in January, we brought Ibrahim into the country, January 85, January 85. And he was in and around the country until June of that year. And in trying to take him out of the country again, we were blocked with the army tanker pointing at our car, and we faced a roadblock. So we still managed to get out of that tight situation and bring Ibrahim back to Durban. Now, in those days, there was no cell phone and faster means of communication. So all we were told was repeat the same operation, same place, same time, same day in a week later. So we went to the border of Swaziland again, trying to get this person across into the Swaziland. And again, the mission failed. So now we knew we were in trouble, and I had given my business card. I had designed his extraction out of South Africa in a way that he would be working for me, and another colleague would be interested in investing in my business. So I had samples and order books and all of that. So that is why they let us go when we hit the roadblock, thinking that this was a legitimate business operation. But obviously we had a car hired and so forth, so they would have known exactly who we are and so forth. So it was a matter of days, just sitting around, and we knew we will be arrested. So towards the end of June in '85, I was arrested, and I was arrested under a section of the Internal Security Act, which was Section 29, which is imprisonment for the sole purpose of extraction of information, no access to family. Your family need not know in which prison you are kept, no access to lawyers, no reading material, no writing material, no music, no newspapers, none of it. So you are just kept in a solitary confinement, and the only reason you are taken out of your cell is to be tortured and brought back into your cell when they felt they would stop for a bit or whatever. And unfortunately for me, my wife was pregnant during this period, and In between the two trips to Swaziland, she announced to me that she is pregnant with our second child, uh, who is now a beautiful grown-up lady, Jasneem. But of course, at that point we felt we might lose the baby and our lives would be finished. So yes, I went through a lot of uh, pressure, psychological torture, and so forth. And eventually, my wife, Rueda, and my dad took a case against the apartheid regime, which was a complete shot in the dark, to say that if the purpose to torture, to keep me incarcerated was to torture me or to get information from me, but the Geneva Convention has a stipulation about how you manage prisoners of war. And if my health had deteriorated to such a point, then the torture has to stop. And if the torture has to stop, it automatically means that I should be released from prison. So one fine night, the police just came and said, "You are free to go." It was the day before we went to court because they didn't want a precedent to be set in the legal system. However, many senior comrades used the same tactic and the same legal argument to be free. So it's just with God's grace that I didn't face a long-term prison sentence on Robben Island.
Yeah, wonderful, Shiriji. Shiriji, that era was more like because Gandhiji was very popular during that time in non-violence. Okay, but here you adopted the combination. It was not completely non-violence, but of course, you know you started doing some arm wing also. I think so. Subhash Chandra Bose was your idol for that. You were mentioning somewhere.
Yes, Swamiji, I grew up in a home that didn't have much vases and flowers and decorations. For some strange reason, my grandfather bought two black and white portraits, one of Jawaharlal Nehru and the other of Subhash Chandra Bose. So from the time I was a baby, I kept looking up, sleeping next to my grandmother as these two. And somehow my favorite was Subhash Chandra Bose. So going into the armed struggle made it a bit soft for me. It's a very tough decision, Swamiji, to say that you will take an arm and you will use weapons to do something against, to get your way. So the ANC, I must say, we were very lucky that in all our training, we understood Satyagraha, we understood peaceful transformation, we understood the work that Mahatma Gandhi was doing, we understood the work that was done by Martin Luther King, and now that the baton was passed on to from Mahatma Gandhi to Martin Luther King to Nelson Mandela, that was the first indoctrination, that you don't just go and hurt people or destroy lives. So at every opportunity, in any operation, the ANC made sure that minimal loss of life, loved ones, or limbs was suffered by the enemy. So largely, it was against pylons, installations of government buildings, and so forth, to show that we are serious. And yes, there were incidences where people were killed, lives were lost, and that is rather unfortunate.
Yeah. Uh, do you have any memories, any incidences, any interaction with Nelson Mandela? Because everyone of us know he was a great leader and spiritual leader also, we can say. And he
Yes.
really fought very hard for whole South Africa. And do you have any memories of him?
Yes, most certainly, Swamiji. Initially, there was a huge campaign, and Mandela was made the figurehead of the ANC of the old guard. And the ANC had internally and externally, those who were in exile, decided that the Free Mandela campaign must be launched. Now, when I talk about the stupidity of the apartheid regime, do you know we could not have a photograph of Mandela or a drawing of Mandela? Children could be arrested if they had that. There was no, uh, his name and his physical shape and presence in the form of a photograph was banned to be published. So this Free Mandela campaign resulted in huge celebrations in the UK, where concerts were held and so forth, to bring about the plight of the situation in South Africa. Now, most of us young people joined the Free Mandela campaign, and it was quite our first touch and feel, you can say, of Nelson Mandela. But then when Nelson Mandela was released, we were not prepared for his release. We were not, it came suddenly. So who actually protects Nelson Mandela when a man walks out of prison? Will it be the South African police, which is the enemy? The South African Defense Force, which is the enemy? Or do we use our own people to protect our own leadership? And the decision was made that, of course, we must use our own people to protect Nelson Mandela and the leadership. So I got involved in procuring. I used to travel with the entourage, doing political work with President Mandela, but at the same time, also beefing up the security apparatus. But I was a businessman at that time and a successful businessman. So we used a lot of funding from our business to procure arms to give to the bodyguards and so forth, which of course he knew about, many others knew about. And my wife and I, Rowena, were very happy to do such a thing. And then at that time, we had launched an alternate business forum called the Consultative Business Forum, which was the first body to host Mandela in his stature as a leader coming out of prison. And if I remember his words, he said, "It is the first time that I feel like a president." So I was very glad. I was the general secretary of the organization, and we hosted him in a very eloquent dinner, and we introduced Mandela to many of the leading business and social leaders of our community in Natal. Then Mandela was the greatest fundraiser for the African National Congress. Mahatma Gandhi, by the way, was also a very sharp fundraiser. He would take out any money that was left in your pocket. And Mandela was a very, very sharp fundraiser. So I worked with Jeff Hadebe, Jacob Zuma, and who were leaders of the ANC in my province, to form the President's Club. So this was a group of business people who sat regularly with Nelson Mandela to discuss issues that were of concern to them. And the President Club later on grew into a life of its own. And today it is the progressive business wing of the African National Congress. But there I interacted with President Mandela personally on many issues. Now there was one, when we had to launch this group, his life was under threat. And his own security people said he should be locked in his room and not leave. So when it was time, I walked into his hotel room and he greeted and he said, sit. And within a minute or two, he put on his jacket and he said, okay, let's go. And the security guy said, where are we going? He said, I'm going to the fundraiser. and you'll know my program. So he said, no, but we've canceled it. He said, you don't cancel my program. If I don't do my work, who will? He said, but your life is at stake. He said, so what? I have to go out and do my work. And he said to me and Jeff Radebe, let's we go. So they were still saying, but we haven't sniffed out, with sniffer dogs and so forth, the venue. He said, if you didn't do your work, don't make it my problem. My work has to be done. So in whatever he did, he gave 100%. Up to his last, we could learn from him practically of how you need to do things enthusiastically and give 100% in whatever you're doing. So there were many such incidents. When he lost his most dear friend, Oliver Tambo, we were with him. I was asked by some of the leadership to sit with him, and he wanted a refresh and a fresh shirt, which I went and bought for him. And so forth. But it was so tough. Oliver Tambo and Nelson Mandela are almost synonymous in the leadership of the ANC during that era. But he handled it with such decorum and such grace. So he was in Durban when he got the news and went to Johannesburg and so forth for the funeral. And of course, during the entire negotiations, we followed what Mandela was doing, and luckily for his wisdom, we did not go into a full-scale war, and we found a peaceful resolution.
Yeah.
So yes, I was blessed
Wonderful.
to work
Now,
alongside
I would like to ask you, Shiriji, after freedom fight, you have another life, right? And when you came to Parampuji Shri Shri Ravi Shankar ji, a life of a freedom fighter and life of a devotee. So how this happened? What was the story behind it? How you came to Gurudev?
Swamiji, we spoke earlier about our business. So Rueda and I had a very successful clothing manufacturing company. We were doing very well. And I was very busy in the African National Congress. I was very busy also raising a family and so forth. So 1994 was the first democratically held elections in South Africa, which made President Nelson Mandela the first democratically elected president of South Africa. Come 1997, and I was on the list to go to Parliament from as a member of the province to the national or member of the province to the provincial government. But I went back to my job. I wanted to be in business, and I refused being drawn into a bureaucratic job. So up to 97. And by then, the entire bubble had burst, and Rueda just couldn't endure any more of the stress. So the doctors had called us in and said to us that Rueda will now not survive any longer. We have a choice. We can put her on morphine or take her off all medication and see if there's something in the world that's an alternate cure. And there was a pamphlet posted to my dad's flat to say there's this art of living. In those days, it was called Part 1 Course that does Sudarshan Kriya breathing technique. And my dad asked if Rueda and I would like to go. And we went. And this teacher that came from India, he was traveling with His Holiness Sri Sri Ravi Shankar. And Sri Sri Ravi Shankar ji said to him, look, there are people in Durban who are waiting for this knowledge. So you should perhaps go to Durban and not continue the journey with me to German ashram. So he's currently known as Swami Brahmatej. And he came to Durban and we did the first course in Durban. Once we did the course, it was a few days after that, it was my wife's birthday, and she invited Swamiji home, And I was hoping that the guy will take a donation of 5 to 50,000 rand and go. And he said, no, we in Art of Living don't take money. We don't want money. If you think there's benefit in a cause, you organize more causes. And the more causes you organize, you bring the same feeling that you have today, you bring to your circle of friends and slowly to your entire community. So Swami Brahmatej stayed in Durban and Rueda agreed to be a full-time volunteer. So from that day, she has been a volunteer of the Art of Living organization. Today, she's enjoys satsang. She's made a CD and she teaches the Art of Silence program and so forth. Uh, I continue to work. So I always make a joke that I have to work to earn the money, and Swami Brahmatej and Rueda decide what to do with the money. But it has been the best journey. For anyone listening to this podcast and not done the Art of Living course, should please just contact the local chapter of Art of Living and do the course and start a journey. So for me, it was at the right time, Swamiji. The elections had happened, the parties had come together, a government of national unity was formed, and both Rueda and I were terribly stressed. We were burnt out. So all of the techniques in Art of Living helped to rebuild us and reconstruct us and take us on another journey, which has been extremely good. It's 26 years now that both Rueda and I enjoy doing things in Art of Living, which is largely three things: satsang, sadhana, and seva.
Wonderful, wonderful, Shirishji. I know you are having a lots of stories as a devotee also, okay? Because you have already shared few of your stories as a freedom fighter. So, but I think so now it is almost 40-45 minutes. So, uh, it can be a very good idea if we can keep one more session with you. And our viewers, they will definitely enjoy this session because I heard lots of stories as a devotee also from you. So, what do you think, Shirishji? Would you like to give us one more chance where we can maybe discuss few more stories with you, South Africa, Africa continent, about Gurudev, about Art of Living? Will it be a good idea?
Swamiji, it will be a pleasure. And let me tell
Good.
you that even as Art of Living teachers, both Rueda and I, problems don't leave you. So we can start off a conversation from where we had the worst ever armed robbery, which left Rueda and I almost for dead. And again, how Sri Sri Ravi Shankarji and the techniques of Art of Living helped us to rebuild. And instead of me falling and breaking on my legs and knees, I became a diplomat. So while you have problems, if you can use these techniques of Art of Living, your inner core is strengthened. And maybe we should speak more about what we've experienced after joining Art of Living and how we have dealt with situations and circumstances then.
Yes, yes. Thank you very much, Shirish bhai. It was wonderful having you here. We really enjoyed whatever you shared with us. And thank you very much once again. Soon we are going to have a second session with you where maybe we will discuss more about our guru stories, our favorite topic, guru stories, and about art of living. Thank you. Thank you
Thank
very
you very
much.
much, Swamiji. Jai Gurudev.
Jai Gurudev.